The year of our Lord 1665 brought with it a blight upon the land of Essex. Fields that had for generations yielded bountiful harvests now lay barren, the crops twisted and blackened as if touched by a malevolent hand. Fear, like a creeping vine, began to choke the hearts of the villagers. In the village of Aldwick, whispers of witchcraft began to circulate, carried on the wind like the seeds of ill fortune. Unexplained maladies afflicted livestock, infants sickened without cause, and the milk turned sour in the churn. Such misfortunes could only be attributed to dark forces, they believed. Strange symbols, etched under the cover of darkness, appeared on barn doors and thresholds. Omens were sought in the flight of birds and the howling of dogs, each sign interpreted as further evidence of a malign presence at work within their midst. News of the village's plight reached the ears of Reverend Thomas Goodcole, a man known for his piety and his involvement in exposing the dark arts. Summoned to Aldwick by the desperate pleas of its inhabitants, he arrived with a heavy heart, prepared to confront the evil that seemed to have taken root. He was met with a mixture of fear and guarded hope. The villagers, their faith tested by hardship and suspicion, looked to him as a beacon of light in the encroaching darkness. Yet beneath the surface of their supplication, a deep-seated unease lingered. Among them stood Margaret Harkett, the village wise woman, her presence a silent counterpoint to the Reverend's arrival. Her knowledge of herbs and folk remedies was both respected and feared, for in times of desperation, even the most devout turned to unorthodox means. Reverend Goodcole began his investigation with prayer and sermon, imploring his flock to examine their own hearts for any sin that might have opened the door to evil. He spoke of the devil's cunning and the importance of vigilance in the face of darkness. Yet sermons alone could not quell the rising tide of fear. One by one, villagers came forward to share their tales of misfortune and dread. A farmer displayed the blighted crops, his livelihood threatened. A mother wept over her feverish child, her heart heavy with worry. In the dim light of a villager's cottage, Reverend Goodcole encountered the first tangible sign of the community's desperation. A strange knot of feathers and twine hanging above a sick child's bed, a charm meant to ward off evil spirits. He questioned the mother, his brow furrowed with concern. The charm, she confessed, had been provided by Margaret Harkett, the wise woman. Goodcole, a devout Puritan, wrestled with his skepticism towards such folk magic, yet he could not dismiss the genuine fear in the woman's eyes. Unbeknownst to Reverend Goodcole, Margaret Harkett continued her practices, gathering herbs and whispering incantations in the secluded corners of the forest, walking the blurred line between healing and heresy. As darkness fell, Reverend Goodcole stood in the churchyard, the weight of the village's fear pressing upon him. He knew that he must uncover the source of their distress, not only to protect his flock, but also to safeguard their souls from the insidious influence of witchcraft. The investigation had only just begun. Margaret Harkett, known throughout the village as a wise woman, tended her garden with the practiced hand of generations. In times of sickness and fear, it was to her that the villagers turned, seeking solace in her knowledge of herbs and ancient remedies. Her cottage, a haven of earthy scents and whispered secrets, offered a sanctuary from the growing dread that gripped the village. The air hung heavy with the aroma of dried herbs and simmering concoctions, each carefully prepared for a specific ailment or misfortune. A steady stream of villagers sought her counsel, their voices hushed with tales of failing crops, sickly livestock, and unexplained illnesses. They spoke of a creeping darkness, a malevolent presence that had settled upon their homes and hearts. For the fevered child, she offered a sachet of chamomile and lavender, whispering instructions for its use. For the blighted fields, she suggested a ritual offering to appease the spirits of the land. But for the creeping darkness, she spoke of a different kind of protection. From beneath a loose floorboard, she retrieved a dark, earthenware bottle, its surface rough and stained with earth. "Witch bottles," she explained, her voice low and grave, "are a way to turn back the evil that has been sent against you." Inside, a gruesome collection, bent pins, rusty nails, thorns, and a tangle of hair, all submerged in a murky liquid. Each item carefully chosen, each imbued with a specific purpose. "The pins and nails," she continued, "bind the witch's power, trapping their malice within this vessel. The hair and urine, they say, draw the curse back to its source." Following her instructions, the villagers buried the witch bottles beneath their hearths, near their livestock, and in the furrows of their fields, hoping to create a shield against the unseen forces that threatened to destroy them. Reverend Goodcole observed these rituals with a growing unease. He understood the villagers' fear, but the reliance on folk magic troubled his Puritan soul. Were they seeking protection from God, or were they turning to darker forces? Meanwhile in London, Dr. Ashmole meticulously catalogued another witch bottle, its contents a source of endless fascination. He saw not a tool of witchcraft, but a relic of a culture grappling with its fears, a tangible expression of anxieties that plagued the human spirit. Margaret Harkett, standing in her garden as the sun dipped below the horizon, knew that the witch bottles were but a temporary balm. The true cure, she believed, lay in understanding the root of the fear that had taken hold of the village. Reverend Goodcole, on his knees in prayer, wrestled with his conscience. He knew he must find a way to guide his flock back to the light, to dispel the darkness with reason and faith, but he also knew that fear was a powerful force, and that the line between superstition and salvation was often blurred. Reverend Goodcole found himself wrestling with a disquieting inner conflict. He, a man of God, trained in logic and scripture, was now tasked with investigating claims of witchcraft, a realm of superstition and folk tales he had always regarded with skepticism. Yet, the palpable fear gripping his parish demanded he act. He prayed for guidance, seeking a path through the darkness that threatened to engulf his flock. The first house Goodcole visited belonged to widow Agnes, whose youngest child had been afflicted with a persistent fever. Agnes, her eyes red-rimmed with worry, spoke in hushed tones of a malevolent presence in the village, a witch who had cast a shadow over her family. "Reverend," she whispered, her voice trembling, "the physician says it's but a common fever, but I know better. It's the evil eye cast upon my poor Thomas. He hasn't slept soundly in weeks, plagued by nightmares and sweats. The livestock are barren and yield no milk. Is this not the devil's work?" Goodcole, though skeptical, could not dismiss the genuine fear in widow Agnes's eyes. He began his search, examining every corner of the cottage, reciting prayers under his breath, a familiar habit when faced with uncertainty. Meanwhile, Margaret Harkett continued her quiet work, gathering herbs and preparing remedies. Villagers often sought her counsel, valuing her knowledge of traditional cures and protective charms. She understood their fears, for she shared them, but her approach was rooted in the old ways, in the power of nature and ancient rituals. It was beneath the threshold, worn smooth by countless feet, that Goodcole discovered something amiss. The earth seemed disturbed, recently turned. He requested a shovel and began to dig, his heart pounding with a mixture of apprehension and morbid curiosity. The shovel struck something hard. Goodkill knelt, brushing away the soil to reveal a dark glass bottle, its surface encrusted with dirt. He pulled it free, the cork sealed tightly. A witch bottle. Holding the bottle to the meager light, Goodkill peered inside. A jumbled mass of bent pins, rusty nails, hair, and what appeared to be dried urine filled the vessel, a chilling confirmation of the villagers' fears. Margaret Harkett, though distant from Widow Agnes's home, felt the disturbance in the village. The finding of the witch bottle would only stoke the flames of fear and suspicion. She knew what it signified, what it demanded. The unearthing of such objects was rarely a path to peace. In London, Dr. Elias Ashmole, upon hearing rumors of the witch bottle found in Colchester, became even more intrigued. He saw in these objects not the tools of evil, but relics of a bygone era, artifacts that offered a glimpse into the beliefs and anxieties of a society grappling with forces they could not understand. Goodkill, back in his church, presented the witch bottle to his congregation. "Behold," he declared, his voice filled with a somber weight, "evidence of the darkness that lurks among us. We must be vigilant, ever watchful against the snares of the devil." Alone once more, Goodkill knelt in prayer, the witch bottle a tangible reminder of the task before him. He knew that fear, unchecked, could be as dangerous as any spell. He prayed for the strength to guide his flock, to steer them away from the abyss of superstition and towards the light of reason and faith. Dr. Elias Ashmole, a man of science and insatiable curiosity, received news of strange happenings in Essex. Tales of afflicted villagers and peculiar bottles filled with bizarre ingredients reached his well-connected ears. His antiquarian spirit was piqued. Unlike the fearful villagers, Ashmole saw not malevolent magic but a fascinating glimpse into the beliefs and anxieties of the common folk. He perceived these witch bottles not as instruments of darkness, but as artifacts of a society grappling with unseen forces. He prepared for a journey to Essex, intending to document these peculiar objects and the beliefs surrounding them. His purpose was purely scholarly, driven by a desire to understand the roots of such practices. The journey to Essex was arduous. Upon arriving, Ashmole found the village steeped in an atmosphere of unease. Fear hung heavy in the air, a palpable presence that even he, a man of reason, could sense. He began his inquiries, approaching the villagers with a polite demeanor and a keen ear. He sought to understand the context surrounding the witch bottles, the illnesses and misfortunes that had fueled their creation. Ashmole secured lodging at the local inn and began his examination of the witch bottles that were brought to him. He meticulously documented their contents, noting the materials, the arrangement, and the stories associated with each bottle. He catalogued bent pins, nail clippings, thorns, and urine, understanding these ingredients not as components of a magical spell, but as symbols of protection, revenge, or transference. During his stay, Ashmole encountered Reverend Thomas Goodkill. Their exchanges were a fascinating clash of perspectives, Goodkill viewing the bottles as evidence of demonic influence, Ashmole as artifacts of cultural anxiety. Goodkill, despite his skepticism, recognized Ashmole's genuine desire to understand the situation. However, he could not condone any view that diminished the power of God or the reality of demonic forces. Ashmole also sought out Margaret Harkett, the village wise woman. He watched her tend her garden, recognizing the deep connection between her knowledge of herbs and the folk remedies she prescribed. He understood that her craft was not rooted in diabolical pacts, but in a deep understanding of the natural world and a desire to alleviate suffering within her community. As Ashmole prepared to return to London, he carried with him not just the documented contents of witch bottles, but a deeper understanding of the fears and beliefs that gripped the people of Essex. His curiosity had been satisfied, and his collection enriched, but the weight of the community's anxieties lingered in his mind. Reverend Goodall held the vessel, its clay rough against his calloused fingers. It was heavier than he expected, laden with unseen contents. The air in the cottage hung thick with a strange, unsettling energy, a palpable manifestation of fear and superstition. Margaret Harcott's cloudy gray eyes fixed upon the bottle. "It holds more than just clay and pins, Reverend," she rasped, her voice raspy. "It holds the very essence of the ill-wisher's intent." The bottle itself was unremarkable, a common earthenware vessel. Yet it was what lay within that held the power, the fear, and the desperate hope of protection. With a deep breath and a silent prayer, Goodall carefully worked the stopper free. A musty, foul odor wafted upwards, assaulting his nostrils. It was the smell of decay, of confinement, of something unnatural. Harcourt remained silent, her gaze unwavering, as if she could see the very essence of the spell contained within the bottle. Inside, a jumbled mass of objects met the eye. Bent pins, their heads tarnished with age, rusty nails, their points blunted, a tangled knot of hair, dark and indistinguishable, and a murky liquid, its color impossible to discern in the dim light. "The pins," Harcourt explained, her voice low, "they are for piercing the witch's image, causing her pain. Each pin represents a torment, a specific affliction. The nails," she continued, "are for binding her power to keep her from causing further harm. They are driven in with intent, each blow sealing her malevolence within the earth." "The hair," Harcourt said softly, "it is a connection to the witch herself, a piece of her very being. By containing it, you contain a part of her power." Goodall listened, his mind reeling. He struggled to reconcile this folk magic with his understanding of God's will and the nature of evil. Was this truly a defense against witchcraft, or a descent into pagan superstition? And then there was the liquid. The villagers believed urine was frequently used in witch bottles, under the rationale that what came from within the body could be used to affect it. By trapping the witch's urine, they sought to trap the witch herself. Goodall knew he needed to understand these objects, these rituals, if he were to truly help his flock. He had to tread carefully between the realms of faith and fear, seeking the truth in a world shrouded in superstition. The air in the church hung thick with unease. Reverend Goodall spoke of unseen forces and the wickedness that festers in the hearts of the ungodly. His words, though intended to guide, stirred a pot of suspicion among his flock. Alone in his study, Goodall pored over parish records, searching for any mark or blemish that might betray a covenant with darkness. The weight of his responsibility pressed heavily upon him. Margaret Harcourt felt the change in the village. The usual greetings were replaced by furtive glances, the neighborly chatter muted by suspicion. She knew the whispers carried her name, a dark current flowing beneath the surface of everyday life. Goodall met with Thomas Wheatley, a farmer whose livestock had mysteriously sickened and died. Wheatley, driven by desperation, confessed his suspicion of Goodwife Agnes, an elderly widow who lived on the edge of the village. The seeds of doubt, once planted, quickly sprouted into a thorny thicket of accusation. A mob formed, fueled by fear and the promise of a scapegoat. Goodall, hearing the commotion, rushed to Agnes's cottage. He attempted to reason with the crowd, urging them to seek evidence and prayer before resorting to rash judgment. From the edge of the crowd, Margaret Harkett observed the unfolding drama. She knew the danger of unchecked accusations, the fragility of reputation in times of fear. Despite Goodcole's pleas, the mob, whipped into a frenzy, seized Agnes. Her cries of innocence were lost in the roar of their fear. Compelled by the villagers and his own sense of duty, Goodcole oversaw the search of Agnes's cottage, hoping to find something, anything, that would either confirm or dispel their suspicions. He wrestled with the moral implications of his actions. The villagers seized upon every unusual item, dried herbs, strange stones, an oddly shaped piece of wood, twisting them into evidence of malevolent intent. News of the events in Essex reached Dr. Ashmole in London. He saw in this unfolding drama another opportunity to study the peculiar intersection of belief, fear, and the objects people used to navigate their world. As the accusations mounted and the village teetered on the brink of hysteria, Reverend Goodcole sought solace in prayer. He prayed for guidance, for wisdom, and for the strength to lead his flock through the darkness that had descended upon them. Dr. Ashmole's fascination with the witch bottles transcended mere superstition. He approached them with the eye of a scholar, meticulously recording every detail. He carefully catalogued the materials used, the types of pins, the composition of the clay, the nature of the organic matter. Nothing escaped his notice. Ashmole began to chart the geographical distribution of the bottles. He noted that they were more prevalent in certain areas, particularly those with a history of social unrest or economic hardship. He delved into ancient texts, searching for clues to the origins of the practice. He scoured books on folklore, herbalism, and even demonology, seeking a rational explanation for this curious phenomenon. He theorized that the witch bottles were a form of sympathetic magic, a way for people to exert control over forces they did not understand. He pondered whether the act of creating the bottle itself provided a sense of empowerment to those who felt vulnerable to unseen forces. Ashmole considered the potential psychological benefits of the ritual. The creation of the bottle, the gathering of ingredients, the act of concealment, all of these could have served as a form of catharsis. He began to correspond with other scholars and collectors, sharing his observations and seeking their insights. He saw the witch bottles not as instruments of evil, but as artifacts of a society grappling with fear and uncertainty. He believed that by studying these objects, he could gain a deeper understanding of the anxieties and beliefs of the common people. He dared to suggest that the belief in witchcraft was a symptom of social and economic instability, a way for people to make sense of the inexplicable. Dr. Ashmole knew his work was just beginning. The mystery of the witch bottles remained, a complex puzzle waiting to be solved. He would continue to probe, to analyze, to seek a rational understanding of a world steeped in superstition. The year of 1665 continued its grim march, each day bringing new anxieties. Poverty gnawed at the bellies of the villagers, and sickness spread like wildfire. Fear became a constant companion, whispering doubts and suspicions into every ear. Disease knew no boundaries, preying on the weak and vulnerable. The physician's remedies offered little solace, and whispers of witchcraft grew louder with each passing illness. Folk remedies, passed down through generations, seemed the only defense against the unseen forces at play. The church became a stage for both solace and terror. Reverend Goodcole preached of sin and damnation, fueling the flames of religious fervor. The line between piety and paranoia blurred as accusations spread like a contagion. Interpersonal conflicts festered beneath the surface of village life. Old grudges and petty disputes erupted into open accusations, fueled by suspicion and fear. A simple disagreement could quickly escalate into a charge of witchcraft. Dr. Ashmole, removed from the immediate panic, viewed the unfolding events with a scholar's detachment. He saw in the witch scare not just superstition, but a reflection of the deep-seated anxieties plaguing society. Margaret Harkett, caught between the villagers' fears and the clergyman's disapproval, continued to offer her traditional remedies. She understood the power of belief and the desperate need for control in a world spiraling into chaos. Reverend Goodall wrestled with his conscience. He saw the devastation wrought by fear and suspicion, but he also felt the weight of his duty to protect his flock from the perceived threat of demonic influence. The accusations became more frequent, the trials more brutal. Innocent lives were shattered as the community succumbed to mass hysteria. The search for scapegoats intensified, fueled by ignorance and desperation. Ashmole continued his work, meticulously documenting each witch bottle as if it were a precious relic of a lost civilization. He sought to understand the underlying forces that drove people to such desperate measures. Margaret Harkett watched as the community tore itself apart. She knew that fear was a powerful weapon, capable of turning neighbor against neighbor. All she could do was offer what little comfort she could, hoping to stem the tide of madness. Reverend Goodall knelt in the cold, empty church, questioning his faith and his role in the unfolding tragedy. He wondered if he had done enough to protect his flock, or if he had inadvertently fueled the flames of fear. The witch bottles remained, silent testaments to a society consumed by fear. They were a reminder of the dark forces that lurked beneath the surface of everyday life, waiting to be unleashed. Reverend Goodall sought solace in prayer, the weight of his parish heavy upon him. The illnesses persisted, the misfortunes mounted, and doubt gnawed at his faith. Was it truly witchcraft, or was something else at play? Margaret Harkett, her intuition honed by years of experience, suspected something amiss with the village's water supply. The crops were failing, the livestock sickly. It was not the work of a witch, but a deeper, more earthly problem. Rumors swirled among the villagers. Some whispered of a curse, others of divine punishment. Fear had poisoned their minds as surely as something had poisoned their well. Goodall, spurred by Harkett's suspicions, investigated the well. The water was foul-smelling, a far cry from the pure source it once was. He ordered it to be drained. As the well was drained, a gruesome discovery was made. The decaying carcass of an animal lay at the bottom, its presence poisoning the water supply and spreading disease throughout the village. Margaret, with her knowledge of herbs and natural remedies, guided the villagers in cleansing the well and purifying the water source. Her wisdom, once suspected, was now celebrated. In London, Dr. Ashmole continued his study of the witch bottles, meticulously documenting their contents and origins. He saw them not as instruments of evil, but as artifacts of a society grappling with fear and uncertainty. Ashmole presented his findings to the Royal Society, sparking debate about the nature of belief and the power of suggestion. His rational approach challenged the prevailing superstitions of the time. Goodall, humbled by the experience, preached a sermon of forgiveness and understanding. He urged his flock to rely on both faith and reason, to seek truth in both Scripture and the natural world. Margaret Harkett continued to tend her garden, her wisdom sought by those in need. She remained a bridge between the old ways and the new, a reminder that tradition and knowledge could coexist. Reverend Goodkill wrote in his journal, reflecting on the delicate balance between faith and reason. He realized that fear, unchecked, could lead to injustice, and that true faith required both compassion and understanding. The witch bottles, preserved by Dr. Ashmole, became silent witnesses to a time of fear and superstition. They served as a reminder of the dangers of unchecked belief and the importance of seeking truth through reason and understanding. The year 1665 would be remembered, not for the witchcraft that was suspected, but for the wisdom that was found.